Hi, it's Gadget UK here again, back for the Haunted MVS Part 2. There's actually a couple of boards, so at the start of this video here we pick up looking at a second board that Mike sent me as some spares, but it turns out that board's slightly better condition than the one we looked at in Part 1, so that's where I'm picking up. So handily, Mike sent over another 1F to use for spares, or repair. So we might be able to get this one working instead of the other one, or we might be able to use this one to help work out what's wrong with the other one, and vice versa. So you can see, you know, it's suffered corrosion in the same sort of area here. It's not quite as bad in some ways, but worse in others. So we've got some damage connections there. Can you see that? They're awful. They're awful. Need to check the wires. Obviously the D0 seems even more affected than it was on the other board. It's pretty bad here actually. Just look down there. Yeah, I tested this. It's not doing anything at all. It's completely dead. Not even a watchdog. And I tested for the clock. There was no clock. So I'll show you that in a minute. But before I do anything, you know, we'll just have a quick look here at the board. You can see, you know, it's had some bodge repairs done here. You know, traces damaged here, just like on the other one. Someone's lifted that. Can you see that? That's been off there. Can you see it's at an angle? This side is raised up, that side is lowered. So someone's had that off there. Yeah, so we need to socket that, I think. We've got loads of damage connections there. Again, like the other one, it suffered some corrosion around here, you know, in this area. So those ultimately will need to come off, you know, with regards to Z80 failures. There's going to be an issue down the sound side. I'd be amazed if the sound side works. And again, the C1, look at this. Terrible corrosion here as well. I mean, it's been cleaned a little bit, you can tell that, but it's you know, it's far from perfect. But the fact we've not got a clock leads me to think, yeah, we could have something further into the board. We've got some corrosion there, just spotted. Can you see that green pin there? Yeah, so we could have something further into the board. I think the B1 is perhaps where one of the clocks or some of the clocks come from, but the D0 as well, I think. I'll show you in a minute. We've not got no clock, but I'm just going to clean up around here with a fiberglass pen, because I'm just curious to do a few connectivity tests myself, try and work out perhaps where we might have a broken connection there, just to see if it's got any relationship to the clock problem we've got. Just a case of going over with a fiberglass pen, and you can see what were dull looking copper traces and things there are starting to come up and be visible. It just means that connectivity wise it's easier to test with a meter, but also, you know, when we get some flux on there later, tin these, the solder will, you know, bite nice and cleanly and stuff, and we'll get nice clean connections. That's actually looking pretty good actually. It's not as bad as I thought. The corrosion on this board is better than the previous board for sure. Even those connections there are looking pretty good actually. But you've got to remember, one of the problems you get with these is these wires, you know, they look great on this side. The wire through to the other side may well not be joining the top side to the bottom side. But that is looking a lot better already actually. I'm quite pleased with that. We'll do the same thing on the D0 here. We'll just go over lightly, because then I can see what's going on there. We can see whether we've got connections, but more importantly, when we put the test probe of the meter on there and the logic probe, it's going to make a connection. It's no wonder this is not working at all at the moment. I would suspect we're missing, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 connections at least. At least when you can get diagnostics up, you've got something to go on. But when you've got so many connections broken, it's you know, no wonder you don't get anything. 9 times out of 10, you'll get all sorts of strange things where you can't even boot at all. You have nothing to go on. Makes it very difficult to understand what you know, where the faults actually are. And that's the thing. It's going to be faults, plural. You're going to have multiple things not working. And that's going to be the reason why it won't boot. I mean, if we're super lucky, it might just be a missing clock, but I don't think it's just the clock. I think when we get the clock back, we're going to have a strange behaviour still, even at that point. But we've got lots of dark wires there, and look at this one here. This is right under where the D0 sits. And then it goes up to a trace here, and it goes down to a trace there, and it looks like it's cut on both sides, and I'm guessing the wire doesn't join to the other side either, probably. So yeah, I'll clean up the underside here as well, clean up these wires. There are several of them at least all around where the corrosion was down here in particular, but this is Z80 related. You can't quite see down there, just shift the camera. Yeah, there, I think these are Z80 related actually. Yeah, I'm going to focus on fixing that one first, I think, and inspecting some of the others, and then I'll perhaps give it a test. But before we do that, I think I'll just show you that there's no clock. So I've got it on the SD mat here, switch it on. You heard the power click on there. Pin 15, that's the clock. You can see it's just stuck low. So I'm just going to have a quick look just at the schematics actually, the 1F. We've got the schematics for this, because I'm curious to see where the clock comes from. I'm guessing the D0 or the B1, I can never remember. I think one of them does some divisions of the clock. I think like there might be a master clock comes from here, and then that might divide out the other clocks. I'm not sure, but yeah, it would appear we have no signs of activity at all. You know, it's just we've got some stationary bits there. Yeah, so a few things to point out. You can't really probe with the logic probe crystals. You know, it'll pull it. Because of the impedance, I think, it will affect the signal. So that's the input there, I think 19, yeah, so 19. So this is going to be coming from this crystal here, and it's going to have the two caps on either side there. So the crystal could be the first thing, because, you know, it's not showing anything there. I'd kind of expect it maybe just show a weak low, but it's not showing anything. But again, like I say, we could be infecting that, probing this, but we should be able to see the output. So pin 20, that's not it, 21, 22, that's the 68k clock, hang on, 20, 21, 22, it's low. So it would either have a faulty D0, something else on there might be inhibiting it, but I don't think so. I think all it's going to need is a clock. As long as this has got VCC and ground, it should, you know, there's our ground I think over there, that might not be. It should be outputting something. Yeah, I'm not sure where the supply connections are on this, but yeah, I'd suspect the D0 actually. So because it's nice and easy, I swapped a crystal. I could have just got the scope on there, but to be honest, it's took me 30 seconds to swap that over from the other board, so we know it's not the crystal. That now just leaves the D0, so I think I'm going to remove the D0 because we should at least be getting a clock, despite even if there's problems with some of the other connections and things on there. I think we should still get a clock actually, and I'd like to set this off anyway because it's, you know, it's pretty corroded around there. We don't know what the state of the wires are underneath and things like that. So yeah, I'll get the hot air onto this next and we'll remove that and then just clean up around there. I've spotted a few connections around here that are damaged. I think one of the ones down here is damaged, but it comes down here and I think it's something to do with the Z80 stuff, I'm not sure. So hot air is on here. I mean, I've got a couple of D0s here actually that could go straight onto this, so if there's not a lot of damage underneath, I might just you know, stick one of the other D0s on, just give it a quick test. If it still doesn't work at that point, I might just investigate, you know, if there's any other connectivity that might be accounting for this. If this D0 is faulty, we're only going to be able to get one of these two boards working. I'm inclined to try and go with this one at this stage, despite the fact it's not doing anything at the moment. We haven't seen any signs of life. The previous board, the previous 1F, that's got, I think, perhaps an LSPC fault as well as some other fault there, the C1 I'm thinking, but I mean I could take the C1 off this one, put on the other one to prove that. But when you've got failed custom chips, you know, like either the D0 or the C1, unless you can deal with a specific failure there with some sort of TTL or, I don't know, CPLD bodge or something that you can stick on top to fix whatever piece of functionality is broken, you're you know, you're in the realms of only having to make one out of the two. You're always going to have some boards sacrificed for the life of others. Yeah, I can hear that starting to click in a few places. That just shows me that it's reached temperature on those sides. It's surprising. Sometimes these larger chips are easy to get off than the smaller ones. I find these easy to get off than those darn Neo buffs actually. The heat seems to spread a lot better with these larger chips than it does on the Neo buffs. I don't know why. You know, you can see I didn't heat the right hand side very much there, and it's just totally molten. Yeah, so you can see a lot of dirt under there. So get you a bit closer, get the reflection off. You see a lot of dirt. So, you know, we could have some damaged connections there, but I think it's more probable this is the fault. So a quick pass with, or a couple of passes with the solder braid there. You can see, you know, obviously bottom ones here and these ones here, obviously, you know, doing more work because there is a bit of corrosion there. That even though I've used the desolder braid and flux, it's not turned them up completely. So I'll get all this muck off here, and there's a couple of wires here that underneath that look questionable as well. So I'll check those while we're here. So I would say we've definitely got at least one or two connections on there that are damaged, you know. But it's well worth removing a chip like this in this area, you know. I do think even if this worked, you know, if it worked miraculously and all we had was a sound issue now, I would remove that C1. Just to you'll see what I mean, because by the time we've got the D0 on here in a minute, a different one, it will look super clean, almost like new. And without taking the chip off there, you're not going to get it that level of cleanliness. Yeah, there you go. You can see that looks pretty blooming good actually. So as I say, I'll check these wires out. Can you see there, little black surfaces on them? I'll clean up the tops, test connectivity through to the bottom side, and if they're okay and I don't see any of the damaged connections to the pads from underneath, I'll just stick an alternative D0 on and we'll give that a try. So there we go, I finished cleaning up just around this bit here. You can see I've tinned the connections here, the wires, I've traced through to the other side, they're all okay. We just got one damaged connection here, as I suspected, but I don't think that's going to cause us our problem. You can see I just started to tin up some of the connections here as well. They're all okay, but again, I'd need to thoroughly test the wires to the other side and stuff. But at this stage, I don't think that's our problem anyway. Until I see a clock, I don't think you know, I'm even going to worry about the connections down here, because this is all sound related. It's all related to the RAM here, the Z80, the YM261, etc., and connections that come from here. It's always these ones here. These always get corroded. These ones here always get corroded. These ones here always get corroded. And then you just get one or two around here and one or two around the D0 typically. The Z80 needs to come off at some point anyway, because you can see there's a bit of greenness there, and these two chips, all that stuff there, will need to come off later if we can boot this. So I've got it on the board in relation to pin 1, you know, it's the right way around, the notches up here. Tacked just a couple of the diagonal opposite corners, and we'll just flow some of the solder here. I'm bobbing in and out there because that's the same side I've tacked it on actually. I can start to drag it now actually, just over the top there. Yeah, we can end up with big clumps because we've obviously got lots of solder in the corners there. We can clean the top of the chip up afterwards, I'll show you that. Make sure those aren't bridged. I'll use some desolder braid to remove that in a sec. So I just need to do these other sides as well. Yeah, that side's not too bad. More or less got that on the first pass. Repeat for the other two sides. So let's give that a try. Oh yes. Now we've got nothing on the screen there, but we're getting a black screen. We were getting nothing before. So if I probe the clock, we'll have a look in a sec, I'll show you. Yeah, we've definitely got a change in behaviour there. So I'm not going to deny I'm a bit disappointed that we don't have anything coming up on the screen, but can you see that pulsing on the CPU clock pin there, pin 15? You know, we've got high and low indicating. So we've definitely got a clock now. The next question is, why aren't we getting anything on the display? Well, that may well be because we've still got some questionable connectivity around the D0 here. So next I'm going to clean up the flux around here and then show you up close what it looks like. We'll clean the tops of the chip there as well, you know, the top of the pins. I'll show you. You can just drag the solder braid with a bit of solder on it across the tops, and it looks like it will look like a brand new chip. And then from there I'm just going to re-inspect some of the connectivity around here, and look at in particular that pin that's not connected on the D0, on the pin out, you know, versus its pin out, and see what it actually relates to, because that could be why we're not getting anything on the screen. But we could have, you know, a faulty chip somewhere else here. If that's failed and it's not corrosion related, you know, regards to how it failed. Again, you know, something else could have failed. It could be an over voltage, we might have a failed B1 or an LSPC or something. I did have an inspection around the board looking for broken and corroded traces elsewhere. I couldn't see anything, but anyway, we're making progress. So I've cleaned off the initial flux there. You can see it's looking good already. I mean, look how shiny and silvery that looks. It's, yeah, there's something really rewarding about resoldering shit like that on there. And then we get a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of flux on there as well. If you're using braid that's got flux in it, obviously you don't need to do that, but I'm using the really cheap stuff here. And yeah, this one's not too bad, because I think I probably did this when it was on a previous board, but the tops can be all dark grey and horrible. But if you just drag along the top of the pins there, can you see that? It's looking super new. I mean, bear in mind you could have corrosion underneath it and around the sides of it stuff, but anyway, presentation wise it makes a big difference. There we go, spot the difference. Yeah, so I'll fix that one trace there and then just continue inspecting around. So it could be, you know, the reason we get the black screen could be the connections here. I think we've got a couple of ICs here that have got some corrosion. The other thought was the 259, because, you know, one of the pins there's corroded. Maybe some weird pallet thing going on where it can't enable the pallet. In theory, I could put the... Oh, I'm not going to hear the tones. I was going to say, because we've got Z8 here, we're not going to hear the sound. If I put the M1 diag in, I might be able to test it and hear whether we've got any issue there. In theory, I could put a game in maybe and see if it boots a game. I mean, that would be absolutely a miracle if it did. But then we wouldn't see it. Yeah, if you can't see and you can't hear, you know, you've got nothing on the display apart from black, and you can't hear any sound, you've got no clues as to whether it's working. That's the problem. So I've added the probe around to see pulsing on the output enable on here, so it's accessing that, and I see activity in all the data bits. So, you know, I think from pin 3, and we've got ground in the middle up to almost the end where we've got the chip select, the output enable, pulsing. So the CPU's doing stuff. I see activity on here, again, pulsing on pretty much most of the pins there, as you'd expect. You know, there's one or two that are stuck high or low, because obviously it's not reading or writing to them all the time. What else? I see activity on these two with regards to their output enables. The backup RAM's just sort of sat there, you know, so they're not enabled. So it's not like these are enabled at the same time as those. But what we could have is the ROM enabled at the same time as the RAM. That's what I'm thinking. Now, the connectivity around here looks okay, but the HC32 is kind of used for the backup RAM. I don't think the work RAM, actually. I think the work RAM's come straight from the C1. So, I don't know, maybe we've got a faulty C1 as well on this board. But, you know, we do have some corrosion around here. I'm tempted to just remove the HC32 on that chip there, socket them up, these two, and just inspect to make sure we've got the connectivity there, you know, with relationship to these transistors and stuff as well, one of these transistors as well. I think the backup RAM certainly utilises one of those transistors. While we're here, we can just remove that. It's not going to be causing us our problem, but this is a bit of a difficult one, because at the moment I'm not, you know, I'm in the dark. I don't see anything. I see activity. I don't see I've got nothing to follow as an actual fault other than corrosion. I guess the other thing I perhaps do need to do at this stage is test all this connectivity here, actually, just to make sure we've got the right connections. I think from memory serves these all go up to all these wires here, so I can test that pretty easily, and I can test through to the other side just to make sure we've got nothing missing there. In fact, I'll do that next. So a few thoughts. I'll switch this on. And I'll show you, we are still just getting a black screen. You know, if I switch it off, hang on. Yeah, so we are getting, you know, a display, but nothing beyond that. And as I say, if we probe pin 15, we've got a clock. 15, 16, 17, that's the reset. So you can see it's high, it's not like it's stuck in reset. If you switch it off, you see it go low there, watch. Yeah, it goes high. It does go low, and actually you can sort of test that in an unorthodox way. If we measure again, clock, we've got a ground there, then we've got the reset. So you can just quickly, briefly short them. It's just the same. We've still got a black screen, but yeah, shouldn't really do that because I don't know what that pin is there. It might be some input or output from somewhere else, but just temporarily shorting a ground to that is one way to do it. I've done similar things on other boards. It's just the same. So the other thing that I contemplated was something to do with the dip switch down here. Maybe it could be putting the system in wait, you know, pause mode, because one of these dip switch positions here, I forget which one it is, it's either pin number 1 or number 8, I forget, because I've done it myself by accident on my board actually. Flipped it on, came to power up, black screen, I was like, oh my god, what's gone wrong here? And it took me a good 10 minutes of inspection to realise I just knocked one of the dip switches up. But yeah, I've measured these, they're all okay, that's not the issue. But it still could be in terms of this reading as an input. So if we had sound, like I say, with the diagnostics or a car, we might be able to hear something now, and that would give us a clue that we've got a problem with the video side of things. There is still, like I say, some connections around here, but as far as I can see, the connections that are missing all relate to the sound stuff. I could spend some time trying to get that working in order to use that to diagnose this further, but let's just see what else we can do. The other thing I've just thought of is with the diagnostics here, if you hold down A, B, C, D to get into the diagnostics, the menu should come up normally, and I think if you sort of hit down 3 times, down, 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 and then press A, it should go into the BRAM, WRAM test. Now if I just show you something interesting here, we can try that in a sec, because I want to see if the system's responding to my controls, you know, my inputs. Is it actually working? Is it just in case we can't see what's going on? I think that's the output enable. Can you see that pulsing on that RAM? And on this one here, pulsing, and you might just be able to see this. I'm sorry, it is going dark in here. Backup RAM high. You see that? High. So it's using the backup RAM, i.e. the system's running, it's running code, it's running from the backup RAM, the work RAM, everything's okay, it's not doing anything with the backup RAM. So if I switch it off and I hold A, B, C, D down, okay, then release, and I go down, 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 A. So bear in mind the screen's black, I don't know what I'm doing, we're just guessing here. Do you see we've got change pattern there? Look at that. That is the pattern of the diagnostics ROM testing out the work RAM. So instead of it just pulsing like it was, we've now got it sort of goes high, 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 low, high. It's like a pattern going on there. And the interesting thing, this is what I was looking for here, is confirmation of this. On the backup RAM, look at that. So we've got some evidence there that this is booting, it's presenting the menu, it's allowing the control input there to select the relevant menu option. It's going into the BRAM/WRAM test, and that seems to be what it's doing. It's toggling between the backup RAM and the work RAM here. So that's provided us, you know, the fact we've still got a black screen here with nothing, you know, not even, you know, there's nothing. It's not like it's some subtle display thing or whatever, it's just black. That provides us with some insight into the fact that the backbone seems to be okay. So, you know, the E0 down here is doing the correct address decoding to enable the ROM. We've seen the output enable pulsing around that right from the start. Well, after we got the clock working. The clock obviously was missing because of a fault with the D0 here. Still could be something around there, but I don't think so. These two sides here now are solid as far as I can see. I followed all the traces here, those all seem okay. We know we've got a load of connections missing here, you know, here and here for the Z80 side of things. This lot will need to come off. So, and obviously we've ruled out it's not the pause thing here, because obviously the system is running. We're just not seeing any video, so we're kind of like suspecting something here or something down here. We've got some 245s for the palette, we've got some 273s for the video output, I think. Could those have failed? I don't know, it's pretty unlikely. But maybe a control signal to these, like an output enable or a write enable for this stuff down here. Maybe, that's possible. You know, maybe it's just not able to do anything with the palette. On those 1A boards, you know, and the 1AX boards, we saw when they couldn't write to the palettes, you got like either a white screen, a red screen, a green screen, whatever, because it wasn't able to initialize them. But it might just behave differently on this board. I don't know, maybe we get a black screen when you can't do anything with the palettes. Well, the palette RAMs, not pallets, plural. So, you know, we could still have a problem with the 259. There's a bit of corrosion on one pin there, but would that result in this problem where it's the system, you know, the diagnostics seems to allow you to certainly test the backup RAM and work RAM, and it does seem to be doing it, It's not like it's crashed, because this is the other thing here. We're not getting a reset. You know, if I probe the here again, we've got the clock to reset. So if there was a problem with the backbone of the system here, i.e., you know, it was crashing the 68K for some reason, we'd be getting a watchdog. We are not hitting a watchdog. So yeah, it's a video. We now have a video problem to try and understand. It's a question of whether it's something digital at the stage where it's trying to process the image, or is it something on the output stage, you know, i.e. those 273s or the palette stuff, so it's not able to, you know, convert the digital to the analog side, you know, give you an actual output. We've got sync, so that's not the issue. Could it be a chip select, or you know, an enable signal for the LSPC or the B1? You know, so maybe one of these is not being enabled. You know, the CPU's writing to it, thinking it's writing some stuff to, I don't know, set a screen mode or to draw some sprites or something, and it's not. You know, one of these is not enabled. Kind of sat there doing nothing. That might be a possibility. So yeah, it's going to be a bit time consuming, but I'm now going to have to start digging through the schematics and looking at the pinouts of these and trying to come up with a theory as to where to look, you know, a theory of what might be going on in order to understand where to look next. Yeah, so a bit of a jump cut here. Back to the board we covered in part 1. At this point you'll notice in a minute that the D0 is missing. I used the D0 from that board to fix one of the MV1AX boards we covered in the original series, because I knew that it worked. You know, my testing, you know, we still have the double duct text thing, but my testing on that board in part 1 kind of gave me confidence that the D0 is probably okay. So it's a D0 short, and right at the start of this clip here you can see, we're looking at the board there, that's the I0 I think, and I did take the I0 off as well, and there's more about that as we progress. So I reinstalled the I0 on the very first board. You know, you can see this is the one I've removed various things from as part of the whole divide and conquer. It's had the C1 took off there previously. I mean, you can see how much cleaner that is than what it was before. We've still got lots of broken connectivity that would need to be dealt with here related to the Z80 stuff. I know that. There was a wire I fixed here obviously on the D0. The D0 I'm now going to stick back on. I've just put the crystal back on. I've not put the strap over it yet, but we'll do that last. The reason being is what I want to do is I want to do some comparison measurements on this board versus the one that's given a black screen. In particular around the S-Fix stuff, I'm just curious to see, because I can't remember, but I think there's a 245 or something up here that maybe is gating access to the low ROM, or the fixed ROM, is it? I forget which. I'm just wondering if something is going on there that's resulting in us just getting a black screen as a result of that. So I want to just check that. But the other thing, whilst we're here, I thought, well, I remembered a relationship between the HC32 and the B1. So I checked that on the black screen board, and that's there, that connection is there. It goes from via here, where the probe is, there, to these two pins here on the HC32. Now the curious thing is, when I was measuring on this board, I couldn't find that connection yesterday when I was looking, and I followed all the wires trying to work out where the trace was broken. By the time I'd followed the wires all the way across here, I had a connection all the way, and I thought, that's strange. I could have sworn I was very, very careful and methodical in checking this, and there was no join. So I tested again at that point, and we did have short, and I thought, that's really weird. I wonder if it's me probing the wires, interfering with them, has made it temporarily work. So anyway, overnight, first thing I've done this morning is measure again, and it's open circuit. I'll show you that now. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say open circuit, but you'll see what I mean if I just put the meter there, so hopefully you can see everything, and we'll stick the probe into that via there. These two pins here, look at the meter, we've got a resistance. So yeah, I think we've got a via there that is acting like a resistor instead of, you know, a short. And if you probe around them, if I was to start trying to follow this now and work out which part of it's damaged, by the time I get up here and I start probing that connection there, we'll end up with a short. It's probably from when I probe it from the other side, I suspect. because you're pushing the copper around, you know, the very edges. So anyway, we'll get the D0 on here, and I'll reintroduce the wire related to the D0, and I'll stick a fix link from here to the wire over there, and then we'll just see what this board is then doing, because that'll be interesting, because a fixed trace, that could make all the difference to how this board was behaving. But at the very least, it should be back up and running again with its original problem of not being able to test the ROM properly. It goes on about, I don't know, some sort of A8 to A12 issue or something, or A12 to A15, I forget. And then we get the doubled up, sort of, not really doubled up, but lots of text missing every other letter or something. The letters are corrupted on every other letter. But so it'd be interesting to see if that's changed as a result of fixing that. You never know, this board might then actually work. That would be fantastic if that was the case. I think it's game over for this board. The D0 was the one that had a faulty clear, I think it was, on the Z80 side. What from experience I found, certainly with the Neo buff chips, when you start to get a failure, as soon as you remove them and put them somewhere else, they're actually a lot worse. It's like the heat exacerbates the problem, you know. So the fact this has been, you know, desoldered and then resoldered onto a different board, the problem has got worse on this. It's deteriorated, and the actual fault with it, I'll show you what it's doing in a minute. But if I probe these pins here, hang on, I'll try and do this super carefully. These first pins here, well, that's the first one there's measuring as a high. Not sure what that is. We've got a clock. I think that's the CPU clock, actually, the third one. Got a clock there. And then this fifth one here, that's the 1 megahertz clock, I think. And there's nothing. It's just floating. And if I point you with the screen, I'll show you what's going on. We're either getting a white screen or a coloured screen. Initially, I did wonder if it was the I0, so I've swapped it over. Swapped over what I think is it a working I0? I think it is. For one that's got a problem with the SROM pin that we covered in one of the MV1F boards. But as you can see, we're just getting a white screen now, and that's because of that lack of that clock. And I can prove that by, if I probe that pin and I show up to the one next to it, which has got a clock, you know, which is another clock, it's like 4 megahertz or 6, see that? We're kind of getting the same thing back as we were before. So we're overclock, you know, temporarily overclocking. We're feeding what should be a 1 megahertz clock, the clock that's next to it, which I think is in 4 or 6, I forget which. But in any case, we've still got the same problem, despite me having found another dodgy trace there. And the D0 obviously is faulty. That means we've now got no spare D0s. So yeah, I think, you know, if I was gonna guess as to what was wrong with this, we may have a missing trace somewhere, but I don't think so. We would have to remove all the stuff around the Z80 in order to get the Z80 stuff working. You know, fix a load of traces around there that connects to C1. So reiterating what I said in part 1, totally unexplained. I have recorded thousands of hours of footage on this camcorder, always edited with headphones. I hear every single sound, and I have never ever, in any of my videos apart from this one, come across something that I can't explain. And it sounds like a female human voice. It was sounded very close to the actual camcorder, certainly when I was listening with headphones when editing. And there was no one else in the house at the time. Was it the cats? I doubt it. It doesn't sound anything like a cat. And I've heard lots of cat noises. It doesn't sound anything like a servo on the camcorder, you know, from focusing. It doesn't sound like me touching the camcorder stand. You can actually hear the click as I'm like manipulating the stand, as you still hear the sound. Yeah, so just playing it in slow motion here. Yeah, so very strange. And as I mentioned in part 1, I tripped to the top of the stairs that same night. Yeah, so we need to redecorate here. This is the point here, I can feel it. It sinks here by 0.5 centimetre. This is where my head impacted the wall that night. And of course this all followed on from the earlier that day where the board went die with no cartridge fitted. So yeah, all very strange set of coincidences, I want to say. But a few people did say that it sounds like it says hell is deep, Chris, which is a wee bit disturbing. And just to rule out anything else interfering, I've lifted that pin, and as you can see, nothing at all. You know, if you probe the ones next to it, you know, you can see we've got the relevant clocks there. Yeah, so the one next to it I think is 68 clock B. That was what I just temporarily just shored that pin to, but it was, you know, it's been like this right from the very start of getting this D0 on here, pretty much. Like I say, it was alright for a minute, maybe not even a minute, maybe about 20 or 30 seconds. It had lines on the screen and then it went off. So yeah, that D0 is the fault. And the reason I lifted that pin there is because I think the edges are affected by these caps here actually. There's one on each of those clocks, as you can see. Got one there, that one down there, I think's got one on it. That one I think has as well. Yeah, so this top one here, that connects to the 1 meg, and you can see, you know, it's flat obviously because the pin's lifted at the moment. But yeah, I just wanted to just rule that out just to make sure that wasn't the cause. In theory, if we get this up and running, I could take the D0 off, stick that on the other one, but is that kind of risky? If that 1 meg clock there is, you know, the connection to the B1 has killed that, yeah, it could be risky. We can end up with no D0s. Yeah, and the fact there's a second fault on the board, I'm not even going to tinker with that other board further. It's just got that much corrosion on the other one. That other one's worse than this one, I think, in some ways. Yeah, so this one, I think what I'm going to do next is just socket up these anyway. We've got a green pin there, so I think I'll socket that up as well. I don't think any of those three there are the actual cause, but it would be a good idea because the corrosion has got, you know, to those locations anyway. We need to kind of rule it out. So if you remember when we looked at this a few minutes ago, it was we could see some toggling on the enables here when we hold down A, B, C, D and then down, down, down 3 times, hit A, which sort of showed that the backbone of the system is working. But again, you know, the fact we've got no video, we could have something wrong here again. It's quite difficult to diagnose at this stage. Anyway, I'll get these off. So after some crazy logic probing here, you can see I've got the pin out here for the B1, I've got the pin out for the LSPC A2, and what I've tried to focus on here is everything clock and CPU related. So for example, on the B1 here, I've just gone across these connections here, so you can see we've got, well, the clock there, 1H1, AS, the assertion pin coming from the CPU, LDS, UDS should be somewhere there, I can't see the darn thing now. Those pins should be pulsing, and they are pulsing. Read-write pin, again from the CPU, pulsing. I then went and looked at these purple pins, and I started on the LSPC first, couldn't see any issues there. There's a clock produced out of the LSPC, I think, there. It looks like it's an output, 8 meg, presumably it's 8 megahertz. Came back to the B1, thought, okay, let's continue around, you know, following around these clocks here. 1 meg, okay, pulsing away. 6 meg, nothing, high impedance. And if I short, and again this is, you know, it's a risky technique, but for a short period of time, if you know what it is you're shorting to, you can kind of get away with it, and I'll show you that. I'll point you with the screen, and what I'm going to do is short that 6 meg there to the one before it, which I believe is 3 megahertz. It says 1H1, and I think there's some typos on some of these. I was talking to Furtek about this yesterday, because on that Neo D0 we looked at earlier, I pointed out that, you know, we got a fault. It was missing the clock there, which I thought was 1 megahertz, I think. Was it 1 megahertz? I can't remember now. I think it said 1M, and I was like, oh yeah, that's the problem. So yeah, that turns out it's a typo. I think Furtek's gradually trying to work through the documentation to update. It should say 1H1. Nevertheless, if I short that, which I believe is 3 megahertz, to the 6 megahertz pin, you'll see we will get some signs of life. So remember, up until this point, I was, well, I have seriously been thinking it's either the LSPC or the B1 has a fault. But if I now short that pin, just watch, I'll count up, hang on, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, that's the 6 megahertz clock, and I see nothing. And if I short it to the 1H1, watch what happens, hang on, see that? So we're not getting the right thing, because the timing's incorrect there. We're passing it a 3 megahertz clock versus a 6 megahertz clock, and that was why the pixels are kind of stretched out, because obviously the timing's not right there. But that shows us that we've kind of fixed this. All I need to do now is connect a wire, a fixed wire there, to feed the 6 megahertz clock from the D0 to the B1. So I'll find a suitable wire points and things underneath, I'll solder that on, and hopefully we should get a normal display. I didn't see, I was looking at it too quickly there, I couldn't see, was there an error, what was the error, I didn't see it. So that's going to be the next step with this board. We might have to move back onto the other board after that, I'm not sure, we'll see, let's fix that wire, see what state of play this is in after that. So I've got the fudgiest wire there. I'll show you in a minute. It's totally cowboy. Wow, it's working. There you go. We've got all the clocks there. These things work. So it's interesting how we started off on this board. If memory serves, and I could be confusing myself here, but I think we're initially missing the CPU clock. Well, obviously, other than the corrosion stuff, but I haven't actually fixed a trace on this board yet. Well, other than the one we just fixed here for the clock. So it did have a D0 fault. I suspect what probably happened is the D0 failed there. It was put into storage until someone had the time to look at it. At which point they left the battery on. It just corroded, you know, for several years, a decade, etc. So I mean that is looking promising actually. The controller seems to be working. Let's check the calendar. Yeah, that's working. Sweet colour bars. That looks okay. Controller test. ECD. Select we know start works. Test to player 2 later. W RAM and backup RAM. Sweet. Let's just come back around again. I suspect we'll get a Z80 error because there are some missing connections there on the Z80 side of things, but yeah, that's looking sweet. So let's get a unibars on. I'm just curious to see, will it boot a car? I suspect we'll be missing sound. So I've got a unibars in. Let's try and boot this, see what happens. Well, that's looking promising straight away. We've got the graphics there that shows the character stuff's alright. Yeah, that's looking fine. Sweet, that seems to be working. So I'll stick a credit in, start it, yeah, looking good. So yeah, there's hope for this board. Still don't know what's wrong with the other one yet. I need to spend some more time looking at the other one. I'm glad I didn't spend too much more time messing around on this board actually. So it's finally working, but we've got no sound. I think the next thing I'm going to do is remove this because you can see it's crooked, the legs are green. I don't even know what damage we've got to, you know, the traces and things there. It looks awful. You see that? So we'll remove that and that bodgy wire. We'll clean up around it, inspect where the damage is. There's going to be some connections here, I think, broken. These three here that are Z80 related actually, that come from the D0. So we'll perhaps have to fix those, maybe fix some of these here. I think the link over here actually to the C1, because that provides the arbitration or whatever, you know, it's like a middleman for the comms. It's got the 245s in there actually. You know, if you think of the MV1As we've been looking at with the Neo buffs, this has got some of that functionality. And I guess I may as well correct while I'm here. In some of my other videos where I looked at like the 6-slot stuff and I was like, oh, you know, everything's consolidated into the 3 main ASICs. That's not true, actually. The reason you've got a load of TTL logic on those 4 and 6-slot boards, you know, the older ones with the Pro chipset, is because some of that functionality is replacing functionality that went into some of these chips, if you see what I mean. So yeah, you know, the functionality has moved around, I guess. You know, some of it was originally TTL based and then they shifted it into some of these. On the newer models like an MV1B and 1C, you'll have quite a large chip there where pretty much everything has been consolidated into large chips. But certainly on those Pro, you know, that early 4-slot, 6-slot videos I did, when I talked about them, you know, everything being inside those 3 chips, that's not true. You've got tons and tons and tons of TTL logic on there, which is, you know, doing some of the stuff that is in some of these chips here now. Things like the D0, you know, you don't have a D0. One or two of the things may be done in some of the Pro chipset, but other stuff is exploded out into TTL logic, I think. So I'll get this off with the solder station initially, you know, the solder. I'll try and free it up then, you know, see if it'll come off. If it's being resistive and still sticking on there, I will release it with hot air, just because we don't know, well, we do know, the pads on the top side are a state. Yeah, and that needs freeing up with hot air. This side here, there's not even a pin. You can't even feel a pin. You know, it's been put on the board at an angle, so this side is through, and this side isn't. That side's almost mounted on the top side only. So, yeah, hot air is required. So there we go, I just heated it for a few minutes on each side and then just used these the chip extractor here just to lift it and it came straight out. Doesn't look like we've done any of the damage there. You can see it looks horrendous, absolutely horrendous there. So I'll just use some flux, the solder braid and normal soldering iron, remove that wire that's floating there. I should remove that first really, but it doesn't matter, it came off without any additional damage. Can't tell if we've got like a floating trace or something here, or whether it's, yeah, it looks like it is actually. Looks like there's a trace here on that chip, on that pin there, that maybe should be going somewhere else, I don't know. You know, it's cutting across, so I might need to take off the one off the other board actually. We've got a socket on the other one, I might need to remove the socket just to see where these traces and stuff go, but yeah, we might be able to work it out. So I've done some initial cleaning there. We've got a trace here missing, so I'll need to join that up. One or two of them need checking. We've got some questionable solder up here I need to clean up as well. Can you see it just looks a bit awful? I'm now going to, and I've tinned some of this has been tinned. I've dragged the desolder braid with, you know, this got a bit of solder on it with some flux, but I'm going to repeat. Now I've just cleaned this with IPA, I'm going to repeat, and I'll do the same up here over these, because these are a bit damaged. Can you see a little bit exposed? There's a bit of copper there. I'll go over it with a fiberglass pen first actually, just to try and expose a little bit more. So I know it's wobbling, but I'll tin them all up, and I'll re-tin some of these here just to get better connections, and then I'm going to test with the continuity, you know, use some magnification, test continuity to these little wires down here to the points, just to make sure these are all okay, so I know exactly what I'm doing before I get a socket on there. But it's looking better already, that area. I think it'll look okay when a new socket's put on, I think. So this is exactly why I had to do that. I had to remove that. 13 wires in total. There's a couple from the D0 as well, so I just need to get a socket on and add those 12 or 13 wires. Bear in mind we've already got a couple of wires here. You know, we've got one for a trace there from D0, the one for the clock that was missing. Was it the 6 megahertz? I forget. I think it was. But everything around here has been tinned up, so I think we're good to stick the socket on. I've taken a few close-ups of this as well, just in case I've missed something off my diagram. So I've also had to do fairly extensive clean-up on the underside as well, because you can see the tons of wires here that have been corroded. I think I previously tested from the top to the bottom side of the board, so the wires are okay in that sense, but it's just whether any of them have detached from the trace, because that's the thing, you know, these can look really good, but there's sometimes you know, a tiny break that just means you've not got a join between the wire and the trace. So with the aim of trying to show you something a little bit different with each video, I'll try and show you the soldering one of these on it. Don't normally film this because it's hard to film, you know, I've got to be up super close to see what I'm doing. But as you can see, you know, these wires here, I'm joining up to the pins here and then exposing a bit more of the metal on this side to join up to the wire, to avoid having a separate wire from those points to the wires, if you see what I mean. So anyway, we heat the wire. This is the last one on this strip here, and then I'm done. There we go, can you see, got a little blob of solder. And then I've pre-tinned the end of this Kynar here. Again, get some fresh solder on the iron there. And if you can, try and push it into the wire. That's going in, I think. Yeah, so you can see what I've done there is joined from this wire to the dip, and then used a bit of exposed, just bent over to go to the wire. It's just because it's super hard otherwise. Otherwise you'd need a wire from here to here, and from here to here, and here to here, and here to here. It's just, you get crazy. I can tidy these up afterwards, you know, straighten them up a bit, separate them a bit, and clean up with IPA and a toothbrush. It'll look super clean when I'm done. So after fixing up all the traces there around the Z80 side of things, you can see, you know, it passes all tests, but when you do the sound test, and at the moment I've removed the SM1 because we're getting this SM1 latch, you know, the SM1 area here anyway, so there's something wrong with the SM1 potentially, so I've removed it. And we're getting exactly the same thing. It comes back with FF. Now, if you remember rightly, a few videos back, we saw that exact same behaviour with one of the D0s on those MV1As. And I think, I might be mistaken, I think I thought that the one with the previous clock failure was the one with that was returning FF here. And I think it's probably this one. So I think this is the one that was faulty on one of those previous boards. I did mark it as faulty, so there was a cross on this, I knew there was a fault with it. I just didn't know what. So it appears, you know, the clocks are all okay. I think there's a problem with the, it's the 273 side of things, isn't it? Well, when it's on a 1A. The clear or the clock pin for the sound side of things, the communication channel. On this board, it probably connects to the C1. So there is a possibility that the C1's faulty on this board, but I think, unlikely, I think this is a faulty D0. So there are a few options, and what I'm thinking of doing is putting the original D0 back on here, the one that had the, you know, the CPU clock was missing, that 12 MHz clock is missing, and I think what I'm going to do is use a D-type flip-flop and feed in the 24 MHz clock, which comes out from the D0. Actually, we can use that from there, use that flip-flop and divide the clock by 2 to give us 12 MHz and feed that to the CPU. So there we go, D0 removed again. I'm now going to stick the one that was originally on here back on, just see if we can get the clock working. The one thing I'm kicking myself on, I can't remember whether I tested the other clocks there. I think I did. I think I saw that pulsing, then there just wasn't on the 12 MHz for the CPU. It just seemed to be flatlined. But, you know, there's a chance there might be something else wrong with this. But, yeah, I guess I need to do it, really. I mean, the alternative is on that other chip, if I probed some of the connections to the Z80 side of things on the D0 we had on here a minute ago, in theory I can make a little board the same to do the same sort of thing to fix the functionality there, because that has been, you know, the schematics for that internal piece of circuitry are on the Neo Geo wiki, but it would involve about 4 ICs. It's going to be quite large, you know. I can imagine having a piece of ferro board or something on top, be quite large. I'd rather try and get away with a really small mod, and we can do that if we can fix that clock. Well, that was a waste of time because we've actually got no clocks here at all, just stuck highs and lows. So yeah, that D0 is completely toast. So I'll stick the other one back on there. Oh, this is painful. I really need another D0. If I had a D0 now, I think this board would be up and running. I mean, bear in mind I've removed that temporarily and done the bypass underneath, but super annoying, these D0s. So I've got the D0 back on there. I'm more than convinced it's the D0. I'll show you in a minute. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. But anyway, I'm going to clean the slot up anyway whilst I'm here. And one observation, in fact I've strained it already, but these 1F slots here are better in my mind than the MV1A and stuff. Because can you see these pins? Just watch this, hang on. You can actually push these down. Can you see that? Yeah, so I'm probably blurring it out there because I'm so close. See if I can see another one that's misaligned, and I can't actually. There was just one that was kind of up. If I just push it upwards like that, it was like that. So it stood out above the rest. You can see it was further up towards the top here, and you can just push these down, no problems at all. On the other slots, you find that the copper, it clips onto like a plastic lip of the edge there, so you can't bend them back down to straighten them up. But that one there, like I said, there was one out of position. I've straightened that up perfectly. That's almost good as new. So that's one thing I do like about these 1F boards, besides the fact that you've got the controller ports on there and a headphone volume thing, slider and stuff as well. You know, it's they're a nice board. It's just a shame I don't think I'm going to be able to get these two working. So we've got our bodged 6 MHz clock there, and it is actually working. We've got all sorts of issues with the graphics there, but this is what it was doing before. You switch it off and on, sometimes you'll get absolutely crystal clear text, other times not. Now that could be in part now due to flip-flops I've got there. A minute ago I did have some really crystal clear text actually, it was missing every other character as previous. So I'm not sure if something is getting worse on here. It could still be, you know, bad connections on something, but I can't see bad connections anywhere. I think what I'm going to do, because we've not made any progress with the other board, I'm going to take the C1 off the other board, put that onto this board. That's the next thing I'm going to try, just to rule out the C1, because I'm kind of thinking it's the C1. I think we're there. Yep, there we go. So again, can you see the horrible brown sludge and stuff around the edge there? So we'll just carefully get that C1 out of the way. Get some flux on there, clean up, but I can do that later. I'm more inclined to get the other one off the other board and, you know, get this one onto there, just to see what's going on with that other board. So yeah, it's exactly the same. So So you can see the bodge on top here, which is just a 74HC74, and we're using the 2 flip-flops in there to divide the 24 megahertz down to 3 megahertz. Now there is a chance it's not correctly aligned. That might be part of the issue with the graphical glitches we're getting, because the single column of characters that is correct are okay. The other ones are sort of flipping out a bit. So now I think the next thing we'll do, now we've proven the C1 is okay on this board actually, so it wasn't the C1, we've still got something else going on, either with the something interfering with the data bus or the address bus, because the fact we get the that error there on the A12 to A15 on the ROM makes me think that either it's one of those two things. It's something messing with one of the address lines, or something messing with one of the data bits. Something coming onto the data bus unexpectedly and interfering with the point where it's perhaps trying to test the ROM. I think now there's a number of things that are doing address decoding, like the E0 down here. That might be something to do with it. Maybe the F0. I'm not sure. Or it could just be a problem with either the B1 or the LSPC. Still, we might have a couple of faults still with this board, but I think, now we know that this seems to be working on this board, maybe the sound side of this will be okay, the bit that controls the select signals and things for the Yamaha and the RAM and stuff here, and the interface, some of the latch signals and things, aren't they, for the Z80 side of stuff. So I might remove this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to remove this one from here and put that onto the other board to see if we can get that other board 100% with regards to the sound. But I will have to obviously have this bodge on there. In the meantime, I've ordered some small SMD 74 HC74s, and I'll mount something on top and just do it nice and tidily once we know it's absolutely 100% working. But I'm not even sure whether this is correct at the moment. It is giving us a video, but the timing might not be 100% correct. We're not going to know until we get it up and running 100% to be able to test a game. What an absolute nightmare. Where the corrosion was, if you remember, it was corroded on these two sides here. Now bear in mind, this D0 has been off here about 3 or 4 times actually, for testing other things on other boards and stuff. I think the original D0 that was on here was the one that had a sound fault that's ended up on the other board actually. Now the one here is the 6 megahertz clock. Now that's not the issue, because we lifted the pin, there was nothing actually on the pin, so it's a separate issue. It's just coincidence that pad's lifted. The one here goes to via there, so I'm going to need to think carefully about how I approach a fix there. And the one here goes to via there. Now you would think that's bad enough on its own, but it doesn't end there. If you look at the chip here, as soon as this chip came off, it came off super easy with hot air. Now you can see this is the pin we lifted. You can see that pointed upwards. I'm going to trim that off. But look at these two. The ends were left still soldered perfectly onto the board. So it's like it's detached, and I don't know if you can see there. So whilst we lost the 6 megahertz clock there, I'm thinking that might be corrosion. I think the corrosion's eaten in here, and it's gradually affecting its way through the inside of the chip there, and obviously it's helped with those 2 pins becoming detached. But I've never seen that. I've never seen that where the bottom part of the pin stays on the board perfectly formed. It was there. It was like it's soldered on with a little angled part upwards, so it's just broke off at that corner there. It's absolutely bizarre. And I haven't used a wire brush on this or anything to clean it up, just the fiberglass pen previously. So yeah, anyway, we'll get this onto the other board now, and let's just hope that I can bodge some connections and things there, and hope that those other 2 clocks are still working. So on that other board, I just need to remove the flux from around there, but you can see no pads lost. This one is a lot better condition than the other one. And you can see here, do you remember how brown and black it was around here after I moved that C1? Just look at the cotton bud after cleaning up. So yeah, that's ready to accommodate the C1 again. I'll stick that on first, clean up there, and then get that crusty D0. It's got 2 pins missing there, and we've got a 6 megahertz clock that we're going to need to bodge on top. But yeah, let's just see if we can just get this one working that way. So I've anchored 2 diagonal opposite corners, and then we just need to drag flow here. We're going to get massive lumps of solder here, I've got no doubt about that, because the pitch is so fine on these the C1. It's twice as fine as perhaps the D0. We can just bob in and out here. So it's been a while since I looked at this board, but we started losing the clocks. You know, if you remember a few minutes ago, we lost the 24 megahertz. If I probe that, it's just high impedance. There's just nothing there at all. But the one next to it, you'll see, if I can get onto it without shorting, it's pulsing. If we look at the CPU here, can you see that? We've got a CPU clock. So, thinking about this, the CPU clock is going to be derived from the 24. The 24 that's missing at the moment is going to be divided down to get the 12 or whatever it is. The CPU, in fact it is, it's divided by 2, isn't it? 12, might even be inverted as well, I'm not sure. But nevertheless, the fact that the CPU clock is there shows that internally, perhaps the 24 megahertz clock is there. Well, not perhaps, there's definitely a 24 megahertz clock there. And I'm guessing the 24 megahertz clock that gets output here, maybe it's, you know, obviously the corrosion is the issue here. We lost one clock already, hence this 7474 here to try and recreate the 6 megahertz clock, I think it was. Or was it the 3? I forget. It's been a while since I looked at this. Nevertheless, I thought it must be the connectivity here. So I've got nothing to lose. This chip is now dead. I can't, unless I was to recreate now the 24 megahertz clock, and it's just getting silly. You know, and I don't even know how I would do that actually, because it needs to be in perfect phase with the actual 24 megahertz that's coming from the crystal. I mean, I guess I could feed the crystal into something and just feed that out as the 24. Yeah, I could probably do that, assuming that 24 is not inverted in any kind of way. But again, it's about the phase. It might not necessarily be in perfect phase with this. It might be one cycle out in terms of when it starts to produce all of the clocks, you know, so some work might be required there if I was going to do that. Nevertheless, I'm thinking I might just try and just very carefully Dremel this top corner of this chip here, just to see if where the pin joins has detached from, you know, maybe there's a bit of corrosion inside it there. But I mean, you know, it doesn't bode well, does it? We've lost 2 already. I suspect if I remove this with hot air and put it on another board now, we'd perhaps lose something else. On this side here where the corrosion is predominantly, you know, eaten into this. And bear in mind, this chip is the one from the other board actually. This is the D0 that would have been originally on the other board, you know, so it's been taken off and on a few times. It's no wonder we start to lose things on that side there where the corrosion was. So I had to bring this part to a close. There is a part 3 and possibly a part 4 if I can find a C1. So at this point in time, we're 1 C1 short. You know, we've ended up really with no D0s. Anyway, there's more about that in part 3. And from these first 2 videos in this series, what did we learn? Well, check your clocks right at the start. You know, it's thou shalt check voltages, thou shalt check clocks. That could have sped things up a little bit. We're still in a position where we've got the original faults on the first board, and obviously the second board is just needing a D0. But also rework, you know, you really don't want to be working on 2 faulty boards where you're swapping parts between the 2 faulty boards. Ideally, you want a working board, or a board at least you know where, for example, the D0, you know it works 100%, and then when you swap it over, you've ruled it out, and you aren't going to be then swapping that D0 again. And the problem we've had here, we've got 3 D0s, all of them have got faults. I do hope you found something interesting in this series. It was painful. It was painful to edit as well. 2 whole days editing, so much footage. Yeah, and we have the EVP thing there that yeah, put me off editing this. Anyway, I do hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel, please see the Coffee and Patreon links down below, and I'll catch you in the next video.